Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel is Finding Value. Today we're going to go over uranium, do our daily technical analysis update on uranium. Let's jump right into the charts. Again, this is just my financial opinion. Please don't use it as advice. And we'll pop right in here. So we're going to start with the physical price. This is at 47.40. We're creating this kind of pattern here. A little bit of a pattern, kind of a funky looking one. Usually they're kind of less steep here. This one's really steep. But that's physical. Uranium, we are still struggling with this resistance line. We are up on it. If we finish weak throughout this week, we will probably head lower. That is what I am seeing. We're going to have the buyers step in here and start moving it on up. If we put a big down candlestick this week, I think we're going to continue and get a little bit of a pullback, kind of like this pullback here. URNM on a daily basis, it's still okay. We're still hanging on, but it's getting a little bit weaker. And if we break through this trend line coming on up to the downside, I think we'll have a pullback. And conversely, if the buyers come in here and push it higher, I think we're going higher. It's that simple, right at kind of a decision point still. And looking at some of these other ones, an ascending wedge pattern usually breaks to the downside. That is where it usually resolves itself. So this one looks like a bearish pattern. Could resolve lower. And next gen looks like it is resolving lower in its ascending wedge pattern to the downside, where we might have a little bit of a pullback. Fission Uranium Corporation is having a pullback right now. So it's getting a little bit cheaper. UEXCF's another one that's pulled back, and it looks like we've got a reversal candlestick here. So this could try to find a bottom somewhere in here. It might just be a small little pullback, and that's all we get. Sky Harbor is also coming out of its pattern to the downside. These Canadian guys are struggling. To me, this looks like it could have some further downside. Canalaska sold off, went to the downside, but we got a little wick at the bottom. Maybe you can find some support around here at the 200-day moving average. I don't think this is going to reverse and move on up quickly, but you never know. Short term, it looks a little weak. Same with Standard Uranium. We came down, we had this reversal hammer pattern, we came back up. Buyers, I don't think, are going to be pushing this up. I think it's going to go sideways to lower here and kind of bounce around. Base load's looking a little bit weaker too. It's like we hit this resistance area down here and we finished kind of somewhat strong to the downside. And the Uranium Canadian crew isn't helping its cause either. So this may have further downside. Same with Fission 3.0, kind of a bearish engulfing pattern where we could end up potentially lower, especially with all those other patterns I'm seeing in the Canadian crew sector. ISO Energy, again, a little bit more of a sell-off today. Still looks okay. It doesn't look horrible. Denison Mines putting in an ascending wedge pattern. These usually break to the downside. If it breaks through to the downside tomorrow, I think we're going to see a pullback. UU going to the American crew. Again, we got a bearish engulfing pattern. It's kind of losing its steam. We could see a pullback here. UEC is kind of mirroring that as well, kind of a large down day. No real topping pattern. We do have some wicks at the top signaling that there's sellers up here where it could reverse. So we could reverse a little bit and head a little bit lower. And Uranium Royalty Corporation looks like it's popping out the downside, turtle heading out the bottom. Again, if we see more selling pressure tomorrow, I think we're going to go into pullback mode. URG, again, a little bit more selling pressure, but we still are hanging on to this pattern. Bannerman's hanging on to its pattern, barely. I don't know if it's going to trade like the uranium, or I should say the Canadian and American crews, but it's right there. Could potentially break to the downside. Goviax is still in the pattern. It's still hanging on. Global Atomics hanging on, but we have a nice big reversal candlestick here, which is bearish to move to the downside. So I think the African crew is starting to exhibit some pullback characteristics in their candlestick patterns with this bearish engulfing pattern. But it's still inside the pattern. It could reverse. I just I think we're probably going to head lower just with this candlestick here. Forces metals, again, we're coiling on up. I don't know which way this thing's going to break, but looking at the other, areas of the sector, it could break to the downside, so watch for it. International consolidated uranium looks like it's kind of coming into a ascending wedge type pattern too. If the rest of the sector kind of pulls back some, this may pull back some too. And it's only on the short term, guys. I'm not talking medium to long term. Short term. Kazakhstan prom, we'll see what this thing what this thing does. It's kind of just back and forth action. It's been moving on up, but what I'm looking for is the contraction in the candlesticks, and we're kind of getting it. We've got a large move here, a smaller move up, and then is this a smaller move kind of contracting up to turn back down? Tough to say. This is Kazakhstan prom on a weekly candlestick basis. And we can see this big move, smaller move, smaller move. It is contracting up where we could turn and pull back lower at some point. It's momentum that's kind of getting tired and wants to turn and come back down. Laramide looks like it wants to head lower. If we break kind of through here, we could head lower here. I'm looking at this from more of a bearish perspective now, guys, because just from all of the other companies in the sector. This thing's still holding on, but we'll see what happens tomorrow for Peninsula Energy. Boss Energy, it looks like we tried to break to the upside here. We gapped up, but it got hammered back down throughout the day. Is this going to remain up there and move on up? Time will tell, but I'm just looking at it from the rest of the sector, and the rest of the sector looks kind of weak. And Western Uranium definitely blew to the downside here. So this is in pullback mode for WSTRF. Lotus, I mean, just looking at kind of all this stuff, we could roll over here if the buyers don't step in and get a little bit of a pullback. Paladin, it doesn't look like it's really moving up all that much. We'll see which way this thing breaks. It's been trying to break higher. The sellers are overtaking it. This could go into pullback mode. LEU, I don't chase stuff that's gone up this much. This could also pull back if it's like the other sector. This one isn't a uranium mining company. If I own the stock, I wouldn't do anything, but I wouldn't buy it up here either. And then Lightbridge looks like it wants to pull back and go into pullback mode a little bit with this large sell-off today. So overall, what's my opinion on it? Well, I mean, I'm not selling anything. Remember, I just accumulate. I buy the dips. I think we could have a dip here. We could go into pullback mode. Some of them are already breaking they're breaking to the downside. The Canadian crew, we're seeing it all over there. The American crew is starting to pull back some. The African crew is kind of delayed. It hasn't broken out yet, but what's the chances that that's going to break up and everything else breaks down? Probably pretty slim. So I'm looking more at a pullback here than I am at a launch higher. That's kind of what my viewpoint is after looking at this stuff. I'm not selling anything. I'm just going to hold on. And if we get better buying opportunities, I'll continue to cost average in. It's that simple. If you guys like this analysis, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.